I say this softly at first, the way truth often arrives barefoot and patient, knocking on the door of your spirit. Stop tolerating what you don't deserve. Not tomorrow, not after one more apology, not when the pain becomes unbearable. Now, because every moment you remain silent in the presence of your own diminishment, you teach the world how to treat you. And the world, ever obedient to the lessons we repeat, will follow your instruction. You were not born to be small. You were not shaped by breath and blood and bone to be overlooked, overused, or overburdened. You did not survive the narrow corridors of fear, the long nights of doubt, the sharp lessons of living, just to arrive at a life that asks you to swallow your worth. Somewhere along the way, someone convinced you that endurance was the same as nobility, that silence was the same as peace, that patience meant self-erasure. But hear me clearly, suffering is not a virtue, and tolerance is not love when it costs you your dignity. There is a quiet violence in accepting less than you deserve. It does not announce itself with raised fists or broken doors. It comes instead with tired sighs, with excuses made on behalf of those who wound you, with the slow shrinking of your voice. It comes when you say, "It's not that bad," while your heart keeps careful count of every insult. It comes when you laugh to keep from crying, when you stay to keep from being alone, when you bend so often you forget the sound of your own spine straightening. I know how heavy fear can be. Fear tells you that if you speak, you will lose what little you have. Fear whispers that your needs are too much, your boundaries too sharp, your dreams too loud. Fear says, be grateful, even when gratitude has been weaponized against you. But fear is a poor architect for a life. It builds houses with no windows and calls them safe. It teaches you to survive, but never to soar. You deserve more than survival. You deserve joy that does not have to be defended. You deserve love that does not arrive with conditions attached like fine print written in disappearing ink. You deserve work that does not hollow you out, friendships that do not compete with your peace, conversations where your truth is not treated as an inconvenience. You deserve to wake up without bracing yourself for harm, to rest without guilt, to laugh without checking the room for permission. Somewhere, you learned to tolerate because it felt like the only option. Maybe you watched someone you loved endure quietly and called it strength. Maybe you were taught that asking for more was selfish, that saying no was rude, that leaving was a failure. Maybe the world met your tenderness with cruelty, and you decided armor was safer than hope. But armor worn too long rusts onto the skin. It protects, yes, but it also restricts. It keeps the wounds from being seen, and therefore from being healed. Let me tell you something the weary rarely hear. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to outgrow rooms, roles, and relationships that no longer fit the shape of your becoming. You are allowed to say, "This hurts me," without offering a footnote. You are allowed to walk away without a speech, without applause, without understanding from those who benefited from your silence. Closure is not always a conversation. Sometimes it is a decision. When you stop tolerating what you don't deserve, the ground may shake beneath your feet. The familiar will protest. Those who grew comfortable with your compliance may accuse you of becoming difficult, distant, different. Wear those accusations lightly. Growth always looks like betrayal to those invested in your stagnation. Remember, boundaries are not walls meant to punish. They are doors meant to protect. They do not shut people out. They clarify who may enter with respect. There is a sacred responsibility you carry to yourself. It is older than your disappointments, deeper than your doubts. It is the responsibility to honor the life that was entrusted to you. Each time you ignore your intuition, you abandon yourself a little. Each time you tolerate disrespect, you teach your heart to expect it. But each time you choose yourself, firmly, gently, unapologetically, you stitch your spirit back together with golden thread. You may wonder if you are strong enough to stop. Strength does not always roar. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet refusal. Sometimes it is the courage to disappoint others rather than continue disappointing yourself. Sometimes it is the trembling voice that says, "No more," and means it. Do not underestimate the power of that moment. The universe listens when you finally do. I am not telling you this will be easy. Freedom rarely is. There will be loneliness before there is peace, confusion before clarity, grief before relief. You may mourn the versions of yourself who stayed too long, who tried too hard, who hoped beyond reason. Honor them. They did the best they could with the tools they had. But do not let their sacrifices chain you to a future that repeats the same ache. Listen closely to your body. It keeps records your memory tries to forget. The tight chest, the restless sleep, the constant fatigue, these are not personal failures. They are messages. They are the language of a soul asking to be taken seriously. When you stop tolerating what you don't deserve, your body will exhale. Your breath will find its rhythm again. Your laughter will sound like it belongs to you. You are not too much. You are simply giving your abundance to places that could not hold it. You are not asking for too much. You are asking the wrong people. The right spaces will not ask you to shrink. The right love will not require you to audition. The right life will not demand that you betray yourself to belong. Say it again until it settles into your bones. I will no longer tolerate what I do not deserve. Say it when you are tempted to stay silent. Say it when nostalgia tries to disguise itself as love. Say it when guilt knocks at your door dressed like responsibility. Let it be your compass when the path ahead feels uncertain. The world may not applaud your awakening, but your soul will, and that applause will be thunder enough. Walk forward with your head high, not in anger, but in clarity. Release what diminishes you. Make room for what honors you. You are not here to be endured. You are here to be alive fully and freely, with all the dignity your existence demands. Stop tolerating what you don't deserve. Your life is listening. Disrespect grows where boundaries are absent, not because people are naturally cruel, but because human behavior follows the paths that are left open. When there are no clear lines drawn, when expectations are unspoken and limits are undefined, others will move freely into spaces that were never meant to be occupied. This is not always done with intention or malice. Often it happens gradually, quietly, in small moments that feel insignificant at first. A joke that stings but is laughed off. A request that feels heavy but is accepted anyway. A dismissal that goes unchallenged. Over time, these moments collect, and what began as tolerance slowly becomes permission. Boundaries are the language through which self-respect is communicated. Without them, people are left to guess how to treat you, and many will guess in ways that serve their comfort rather than your dignity. When you do not name what is acceptable and what is not, others may assume everything is. They may take more time than you can give, demand more energy than you can spare, speak to you in ways they would never tolerate themselves. Not because you deserve it, but because nothing has told them to stop. There is a common misunderstanding that setting boundaries is an act of aggression, that it creates distance or conflict. In truth, the absence of boundaries is what creates resentment, confusion, and quiet hostility. When you continuously allow behavior that hurts you, something inside begins to harden. You smile on the outside while keeping score on the inside. You say yes while your body screams no. That internal contradiction becomes fertile ground for exhaustion, bitterness, and self-doubt. Disrespect thrives in that environment because it is never interrupted. Many people learn early in life that their needs are inconvenient. They are praised for being easy, adaptable, low maintenance. Over time, they internalize the belief that love is something to be earned through endurance. So they stay quiet when they should speak, flexible when they should be firm, understanding when they should be protected. They confuse being needed with being valued. In those conditions, boundaries feel dangerous, like a risk that could cost them connection. But connection that requires self-erasure is not connection, it is captivity. When boundaries are absent, patterns form. People repeat what they are allowed to repeat. If someone interrupts you and nothing happens, interruption becomes normal. If someone disrespects your time and you adjust yourself around it, lateness becomes expected. If someone speaks to you harshly and you respond with silence, harshness becomes acceptable. Each unchallenged moment reinforces the next. Disrespect does not usually arrive fully formed. It grows through repetition, fed by the belief that there will be no consequence. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about clarifying yourself. They say, "This is where I end and you begin. This is what I can give and what I cannot. This is how I expect to be treated if I am to remain present." When you state a boundary, you are not asking for permission. You are offering information. Those who respect you will adjust. Those who benefit from your lack of boundaries may resist, minimize, or mock them. That reaction alone reveals more than silence ever could. It is important to understand that discomfort is not the same as harm. Setting boundaries often feels uncomfortable because it interrupts familiar dynamics. You may feel guilty, anxious, or afraid of being misunderstood. But discomfort is a temporary sensation. Disrespect is a lasting wound. Choosing short-term discomfort over long-term erosion is an act of self-preservation. Every time you honor a boundary, you send a message to yourself that your well-being matters, that your inner voice deserves to be heard. Disrespect also grows when boundaries are inconsistent. Saying no once and yes the next, enforcing limits sometimes and ignoring them other times, creates confusion. People learn which version of you they can push. Consistency is what gives boundaries their strength. It teaches others that your words mean something, that your limits are not negotiable based on mood, guilt, or pressure. This consistency does not make you rigid, it makes you reliable to yourself. There is also a deeper layer where boundaries are not just spoken but embodied. People sense when you doubt your own limits. If you apologize for having needs, if your voice softens when you state a boundary, if you immediately explain and justify yourself, you unintentionally signal uncertainty. Disrespect often slips through those cracks. Owning your boundaries with calm certainty changes the energy of an interaction. It shifts the balance from pleading to presence. Some people will accuse you of changing when you begin to set boundaries. What they often mean is that you are no longer behaving in ways that were convenient for them. Growth disrupts comfort. When you stop tolerating disrespect, you expose it. What was once hidden under politeness becomes visible. This can be unsettling, especially if you have built your identity around being accommodating. But accommodation without mutual respect is a slow abandonment of self. It is also necessary to recognize that not everyone deserves access to you. Boundaries help you decide who stays close and who remains at a distance. They are not punishments, they are filters. They allow relationships to exist at levels that are healthy rather than forced. Without boundaries, you may find yourself surrounded by people yet deeply unseen. With boundaries, your circle may become smaller, but it becomes safer. Disrespect does not only come from others, it can also come from the way you treat yourself. When you ignore your own limits, overwork your body, silence your intuition, or dismiss your emotions, you model the very behavior you wish others would stop. Self-boundaries are just as important as interpersonal ones. They teach you how to rest, when to step back, when to say enough. Honoring them creates an internal alignment that naturally influences external relationships. Boundaries require clarity. You must know what you value before you can protect it. You must recognize what drains you before you can refuse it. This awareness takes honesty, and honesty can be uncomfortable. It may require admitting that certain relationships are unhealthy, that certain environments diminish you, that certain habits keep you small. But clarity is the foundation on which respect is built. Where boundaries are absent, disrespect grows unchecked, like weeds in unattended soil. Where boundaries are present, respect has a structure to stand on. It knows where to live, how to behave, what is required to stay. Boundaries do not guarantee perfect treatment, but they give you a way to respond when respect is missing. They give you choice agency and the ability to protect your sense of self in a world that will always test it. Learning to set boundaries is not a single decision but a practice. You will stumble, over-explain, retreat, try again. Each attempt strengthens the muscle of self-respect. Each moment you choose clarity over comfort, you interrupt the cycle that allows disrespect to grow. Over time, the spaces around you begin to change. Conversations shift. Expectations realign. The way people approach you adjusts because the terms have changed. Not because you demanded perfection, but because you stopped offering access without respect. Outgrowing people is a form of wisdom, though it is rarely described that way when you are living through it. More often, it feels like confusion, guilt, or quiet grief. It begins subtly, almost invisibly. Conversations that once felt nourishing start to feel repetitive. Laughter that once came easily now feels forced. You find yourself translating your thoughts into smaller versions so they fit into spaces that no longer expand with you. Nothing dramatic has happened. No clear betrayal or rupture. Just a growing sense that you are no longer speaking the same language. Many people are taught that loyalty means permanence, that real bonds should never change shape. This belief can make growth feel like a moral failure. When you begin to outgrow someone, you may question your character before you question the compatibility of the relationship. You ask yourself why you are restless, why you feel distant, why the connection no longer satisfies you. You wonder if you are becoming ungrateful, arrogant, or cold. But growth does not ask for permission, and wisdom does not always announce itself with comfort. People enter our lives at different stages, and often they are perfectly aligned with who we are at that moment. They meet us where we stand, share our fears, echo our beliefs, validate our wounds. That alignment can be real and meaningful without being permanent. When you evolve, the mirror changes. What once reflected you clearly may begin to distort. Holding on to relationships that no longer fit can require a kind of self-abandonment that slowly dulls your sense of truth. Outgrowing someone does not mean they were wrong or that you are better. It means the version of you that needed that connection has transformed. Wisdom recognizes that growth is not linear and not synchronized. Everyone moves at their own pace, in their own direction. Expecting people to grow with you simply because they once walked beside you is an expectation that ignores human complexity. Some people are meant to be chapters, not the entire story. There is a quiet courage required to admit that a relationship no longer serves your becoming. It is easier to stay familiar than to step into uncertainty. Familiarity offers predictability, even when it costs you expansion. Outgrowing someone often means choosing authenticity over approval. It means allowing yourself to be misunderstood, rather than staying understood at the expense of your truth. That choice can feel lonely, especially if the relationship has history, shared memories, or emotional investment. Wisdom does not rush this process. It does not discard people carelessly. It observes, reflects, and listens. It notices patterns rather than isolated moments. It recognizes when effort flows in one direction, when conversations circle the same unresolved ground, when support becomes conditional or absent. Outgrowing someone is rarely about one disagreement. It is about an accumulation of misalignment that no longer feels temporary. There is also grief in wisdom. Letting go of people you once loved deeply can feel like mourning a living presence. You grieve not only the person, but the future you imagined with them. You grieve the ease that once existed, the sense of belonging that once felt natural. Wisdom allows space for that grief without using it as a reason to stay stuck. It understands that pain is not proof that a decision is wrong. Often it is proof that the decision matters. Sometimes outgrowing people reveals itself through silence. You stop reaching out as often. You notice relief where there used to be obligation. You feel lighter after distance, even if you feel sad too. These emotional signals are not betrayals, they are information. Wisdom pays attention to them instead of suppressing them. It asks what your inner world is responding to and why. Outgrowing people can also expose how much you have changed. You may realize that you now value different things, speak more honestly, tolerate less, or dream bigger. In some relationships, your growth is welcomed and celebrated. In others, it is met with resistance, sarcasm, or subtle undermining. Wisdom recognizes that discomfort with your growth is not your responsibility to fix. You are not required to remain smaller so others can remain comfortable. There is a difference between abandoning people and releasing them. Abandonment is driven by avoidance or cruelty. Release is driven by clarity. Wisdom chooses release when staying would require pretending, minimizing, or silencing parts of yourself. It understands that distance can be an act of respect, not rejection. Respect for the other person's path and respect for your own. Outgrowing people also teaches you about attachment. It reveals where you have confused history with compatibility, longevity with depth. Just because someone has been in your life for a long time does not mean they are meant to stay in it forever. Wisdom separates gratitude for what was from obligation to what no longer is. It allows appreciation without clinging. This process can be especially difficult when the other person does not understand or accept the change. They may accuse you of changing, becoming distant, or thinking you are better than them. Wisdom hears the pain beneath those words without surrendering to guilt. It knows that not everyone will have the capacity to understand your evolution, and understanding is not a prerequisite for truth. Outgrowing people often leads to fewer relationships but deeper ones. As you become clearer about who you are, you become more selective about who has access to you. Wisdom values quality over quantity. It prefers alignment over familiarity. It chooses relationships where growth is not a threat but a shared value, where change is met with curiosity instead of fear. There is also self-respect in outgrowing people. It signals that you are paying attention to your inner life, that you are not ignoring discomfort just to maintain appearances. Wisdom does not stay where it must constantly explain itself. It does not linger where it is tolerated rather than valued. It understands that belonging should not require performance. Outgrowing people is not a failure of love. Sometimes it is the evidence of it. Love for yourself, love for truth, love for the possibility of a life that continues to expand. Wisdom knows that clinging to what no longer fits can prevent you from meeting what does. It knows that making space is sometimes the most honest thing you can do. As you grow, you may look back with compassion rather than resentment. You may see how those relationships supported you at one time, how they helped shape who you became. Wisdom honors that without trying to recreate it. It allows the past to be complete. It understands that growth is not about erasing what was, but about not being imprisoned by it. Outgrowing people sharpens discernment. It teaches you to recognize alignment early, to value mutual effort, to trust the feeling of ease as much as the intensity of connection. Wisdom learns that not every bond is meant to last, but every bond can teach. It carries those lessons forward without dragging the relationship along with them. There is a quiet maturity in allowing people to remain who they are while allowing yourself to become who you are becoming. Wisdom does not demand that others catch up. It simply keeps walking. aware that paths diverge not because of wrongdoing, but because of direction. Choosing yourself is an act of courage because it goes against many of the lessons you were quietly taught to survive. From an early age, you learn how to adjust, how to accommodate, how to read the room before you speak. You learn which parts of you are welcomed and which parts should be softened, hidden, or postponed. Over time, this becomes second nature. You call it maturity, kindness, patience. Rarely do you call it what it often is, fear of losing love, approval, or belonging. Choosing yourself asks you to unlearn that reflex, and unlearning can feel far more frightening than never knowing. Courage is often mistaken for loud defiance or dramatic change, but choosing yourself is usually quiet. It happens internally before it ever shows on the outside. It begins when you admit, perhaps only to yourself, that something is not right, that you are tired in a way rest cannot fix, that you feel invisible even when surrounded by people, that you are living in constant reaction instead of intention. This honesty can feel like betrayal to the version of you who worked so hard to endure. Yet without this moment of recognition, courage has no place to stand. Choosing yourself means acknowledging your needs without immediately dismissing them. Many people have been trained to question their own feelings before anyone else does. You ask whether you are overreacting, being too sensitive, expecting too much. Courage interrupts that habit. It says your experience is valid even before it is understood. It allows your inner voice to speak without cross-examination. This is not arrogance, it is self-trust, and self-trust is built through brave repetition. There is risk in choosing yourself because it changes dynamics. When you stop overgiving, those who benefited from your exhaustion may feel uncomfortable. When you stop explaining yourself endlessly, those who relied on your doubt may feel challenged. Courage is required not because choosing yourself is wrong, but because it reveals truths others may prefer to ignore. It disrupts familiar patterns. It exposes imbalance. It asks for accountability, sometimes without a single word spoken. Many people confuse self-sacrifice with love. They believe love must hurt, must require compromise that erases identity, must be proven through suffering. Choosing yourself dismantles that belief. It asks whether love that demands your silence is love at all. Courage is required to ask that question honestly, especially when the answer threatens something you have invested years in preserving. Walking away from what harms you can feel harder than staying, because staying allows you to avoid the unknown. Choosing yourself often comes with guilt. Guilt for resting when others expect productivity. Guilt for saying no when yes would be easier. Guilt for prioritizing your peace when chaos feels familiar. Courage does not eliminate this guilt, it moves with it. It recognizes that guilt is often a sign of growth, not wrongdoing. When you have been conditioned to put yourself last, choosing yourself feels unnatural at first, like walking against gravity. There is also grief in choosing yourself. You grieve the time you spent abandoning your needs. You grieve relationships that cannot follow you into this new way of being. You grieve the fantasy that one day, if you endured long enough, things would magically change. Courage allows space for that grief without allowing it to dictate your future. It understands that pain is not a signal to return to harm. Choosing yourself requires listening deeply to your body. The body does not lie in the way the mind often does. It tightens, aches, resists, and withdraws when something is wrong. Courage is required to take those signals seriously, especially in a world that praises endurance over well-being. Choosing yourself may mean slowing down when everyone else is rushing, resting when productivity is celebrated, stepping back when persistence is applauded. These choices can look like weakness from the outside, but they are rooted in profound self-respect. There is courage in setting boundaries even when your voice shakes. Boundaries expose what you value. They declare where you end and where others begin. Choosing yourself means accepting that not everyone will respect those boundaries. Some will test them. Some will mock them. Some will ignore them. Courage is continuing to uphold them anyway, not as punishment but as protection. It is understanding that access to you is a privilege, not an entitlement. Choosing yourself also means letting go of the need to be understood by everyone. You may explain your choices carefully and still be misunderstood. You may be labeled selfish for doing what is necessary. Courage accepts this without shrinking. It recognizes that being misjudged is less damaging than being untrue to yourself. Approval is fleeting, integrity endures. There is a subtle bravery in choosing yourself daily, not just in moments of crisis. It shows up in small decisions: what you tolerate, what you consume, how you speak to yourself when no one is listening. It shows up when you choose rest over overextension, honesty over harmony, alignment over attachment. These choices accumulate. They shape a life that feels lived from the inside out rather than performed for an audience. Choosing yourself does not mean disregarding others. It means no longer abandoning yourself in the process of caring. Courage understands the difference. It knows that resentment grows when self-care is neglected. It knows that generosity without limits leads to depletion. Choosing yourself allows your giving to come from abundance rather than obligation. There is fear that choosing yourself will make you lonely. Sometimes it does, at least temporarily. Distance may form where closeness once existed. But courage trusts that loneliness born of authenticity is less damaging than connection built on self-denial. It trusts that new relationships can only meet you as deeply as you have met yourself. Choosing yourself creates the conditions for healthier bonds, even if it requires patience. Choosing yourself also involves confronting the stories you tell about who you are allowed to be. You may carry narratives that say you are only valuable when useful, only lovable when agreeable, only safe when silent. Courage challenges these stories. It asks where they came from and whether they still serve you. Letting go of old identities can feel like losing protection, but it often reveals freedom that was always waiting. There is courage in choosing yourself when no one applauds. When there is no immediate reward, no visible validation, no reassurance that you are doing the right thing. Much of self-choice happens in private, unseen by those who once had access to your energy. Courage is continuing anyway, trusting that your inner alignment matters even when it goes unnoticed. Choosing yourself means allowing your values to guide you more than your fears. Fear asks what you might lose. Courage asks what you might gain. Gain is not always material or visible. Sometimes it is peace. Sometimes it is clarity. Sometimes it is the quiet confidence of knowing you are no longer at war with yourself. There is also humility in choosing yourself. You begin to recognize where you have overextended, overpromised, over-identified with roles that drained you. Courage allows you to admit limits without shame. It allows you to say, "I cannot do this anymore," without justifying your humanity. Limits are not failures, they are truths. Choosing yourself reshapes your relationship with time. You stop rushing to prove your worth. You stop postponing joy for some imagined future, where everything is finally perfect. Courage allows you to value the present, to choose what nourishes you now rather than what merely sustains appearances. It teaches you that life is not a rehearsal. There is a deep courage in trusting your intuition. Intuition often whispers where logic debates. Choosing yourself means listening to that whisper even when it contradicts expectations. It means honoring inner knowing over external pressure. This trust is built slowly through repeated acts of self-loyalty. Choosing yourself may mean redefining success. It may mean valuing well, being over achievement, alignment over ambition, meaning over momentum. Courage allows you to walk paths that make sense to you, even if they confuse others. It allows you to resist comparison in a world that constantly measures worth. There is bravery in choosing yourself when you have been chosen last for so long that it feels unfamiliar. You may feel undeserving at first. Courage does not wait for you to feel worthy. It acts as if you already are. Over time, the feeling follows the behavior. Choosing yourself is not a single moment, but a series of decisions, some small, some life-altering. You will not always get it right. You will sometimes retreat into old patterns. Courage is returning to yourself without punishment. It is learning rather than condemning. It is staying curious about your own needs. There is power in choosing yourself because it changes how you move through the world. You become less reactive, less desperate for validation, less willing to compromise your core. You begin to attract experiences that reflect the respect you have cultivated internally. Not because you demand it, but because you embody it. Choosing yourself also invites responsibility. When you stop blaming others for your dissatisfaction, you take ownership of your choices. Courage is accepting that responsibility without self-attack. It is recognizing your agency even when circumstances are difficult. It is choosing response over reaction. There is tenderness in courage. Choosing yourself is not about hardening or becoming indifferent. It is about caring deeply without self-neglect. It is about allowing softness without surrendering strength. Courage holds both. When you choose yourself, you begin to listen differently. You hear what excites you and what drains you. You notice where your energy flows easily and where it resists. Courage is following those signals rather than overriding them out of habit or fear. Choosing yourself can feel like standing alone at first, but over time it becomes a way of standing firmly within yourself. That internal stability changes everything. Decisions become clearer. Relationships become more honest. Life feels less like something happening to you, and more like something you are participating in consciously. Courage grows each time you choose yourself without apology. Each boundary held, each truth spoken, each rest taken despite guilt strengthens it. Over time, choosing yourself stops feeling like rebellion and starts feeling like alignment. It becomes less about proving anything and more about honoring what is already true inside you. Choosing yourself is an act of courage because it asks you to trust that you are worthy of a life that does not require constant self-denial. It asks you to believe that your needs matter, that your voice deserves space, that your presence is enough without performance. It asks you to live as if your inner world deserves the same care you offer everyone else.